My name is Torsten Overgaard. I'm a Danish photographer. I travel the world taking photographs and teaching. This episode is about the Leica M9, the vintage digital camera. So this is a review of a kind of old camera. I mean, in any digital camera that is like 7 years old is a really old camera. So the reason I review this one is that it's still a very interesting camera. If you want to get into Leica, then you can get this one secondhand and it's still a great camera. The story behind this camera was that Leica is known for the film cameras they have done for 100 years. And then they did the first digital Leica, that was the Leica M8, but it had a crop sensor. And that one came in 2006. And Leica kept saying that it's not possible to make a full frame sensor because the lens is so close to the sensor in the camera here. So there would be too much angle in the sides. But then in 2009, they had a release event in New York, actually on September 9, 2009, 9:09 a.m. in the morning, where they released the Leica M9 with a full frame sensor. So I got the camera within 48 hours after they released it. I found one in Germany and I bought it. And then I started shooting with it. And I started an article on my website, how I used it, what I learned from it, how to debug some of the things with colors and whatever else was with the camera. And that review have grown over the last 7 years to be 19 pages. So it is actually the world's longest camera review ever made, and probably that will ever be made. And I had to drop in my my Leica M240. I have two of them, so I dropped them into Leica to get them serviced. And I wouldn't get them back till a week or two later, so I thought, okay, I'm just going to use that time to just pick up one of my Leica M9s and shoot with it again. And it was just supposed to be 1 or 2 weeks, but it actually extended to 6 weeks because I fell in love with the camera again. And that made me make a new page 19 on my Leica M9 review that is on my website, about that I basically fall in love with this camera again. So let's look at the camera and see why it's still a valid camera for anybody who wants a digital Leica. So let me just give you a short overview of this camera. So as with every Leica, the aperture you set here is manually, and also the focus here is manually. That's the same for all Leica M lenses. Then you have, here you have the viewfinder, so that's the one that you look through. And the picture is going to be double, and then when you focus, it's going to fall in place. And that's when you have to focus. And the way it does that is that it has this little window over here. And there's a coupling here. This is very mechanical. It's not electronic or anything. So if you look here, you see when you turn the focus on the lens, you can see this piece of metal moving up and down here. And that's simply the one that presses the focusing wheel here. And that's what makes the picture move over here so you can achieve focus. And that's kind of a miracle that you can have a lens like this one that have really narrow focus. And then mechanically you can actually have exact focus like this precise 3 meters away. That's amazing. But that's part of what you get with a Leica. And you can see also here there's a little window here. The new Leicas don't have this. What this window does is that it gives light into the frame lines in the viewfinder. So in the viewfinder you have frame lines that shows, you actually see this white, but then you have frame lines in here that shows with this lens, this is what you crop. So this gives the light to this one. In the new Leica, you can see there's no window because it's LED lit. So it just gives like maybe a classic look. Over here you have a frame selector. It's something that has gone off the modern cameras because nobody really uses it. What it does is have 3 different settings. And the idea is that when you have a 50mm here and you look through it, and you can see if I change it here, it's going to be 75 or 135, or here it's going to be 90. I can see which lens should I put on to get this crop. Nobody really uses it, and that's one of the reasons I removed it. Sometimes they put them back on cameras if they're supposed to be a little bit, classic looking or something like that. Not really important thing. This is the release button for the lens. And you press it, you turn it a little bit. And let's just look in here again, because here we have a reader here of the 6-bit code. And what it does is that reads the 6-bit code on the lens here. And it's a very simple code. And all it tells the camera is this is the 50mm Noclux or the 90mm 2.0. That's all it does. And if you look really close in here, you can see 3 small eyes down here inside the house, and they measure the reflection of light on those stripes on the shutter curtain, and that is how the light meter works. It just reads the reflection of, like, the light goes through the lens, hits those stripes, and then that's how it comes up with a suggestion for what your shutter speed should be. Then we have here up on the top, we have the shutter release, and it simply goes off, single, continuous, self-timer. And I usually have mine on continuous because then I can take one photo, I can hold it down if something happens, I want to keep shooting. Then we have here the shutter time, and it starts out on, I call it automatic, but it's actually aperture priority. So what it does when it's on aperture priority is that inside the viewfinder it gives you a suggestion like 1/25 of a second, and if you agree with that, you just take the picture. If you want to change it and say, no, I want to go 1/500 per second or something like that, then you change it to 1/500, and then you just take the picture at that, and then you go back to aperture mode. And for you who have never seen a shutter, this is how it looks. This is the metal curtain we have in here, and when you take a picture, it simply just goes up, and then the sensor can be exposed to light, and that's all it does. Then we have a hot shoe up here, or a flash shoe, that's so you can put on a flash. Nobody really does that with a Leica. You can also get, if you have wide angle lenses, you can get a little viewfinder up here. So like, for example, it's a 21mm viewfinder. It's actually an optical viewfinder you put on. So first you look at this through this one and see this is the frame, and then you look at this one and you focus. And it sounds really old school, and it kind of is, but it's something you get used to when you have to, and that's something you have to when you have a Leica. Then we have almost historic thing over here, that this is the last model that had it, and this is so you can put in a USB cable, and that's a really bad idea to have. You should always download your pictures with the SD card, but I had this and I even supplied a cable with it, but usually what happened when you used the cable with a computer was that either the computer or the camera died, so you shouldn't use that, and that it's like historic, no cameras have it anymore. We can actually look at the camera first. Down here we have here for a tripod that you can attach here. And then it's like old school film Leicas that you open the box here, take down off the bottom plate. And if you look here, you see you have this little cutout here, and you think, oh, this is really cute. It looks like they're trying to make it look like you can put in a film. But that's actually not the case. What they have is that it's this space for the lock of the bottom plate. And you have the socket for the tripod sits here, and that's what you see on the inside here. In the new camera models, they put this socket on the camera body itself, because what happened was that sometimes people would put the camera on a tripod and then put on a big lens, and then suddenly there was only the bottom plate connected to the tripod because the camera was so heavy. But that's what that does. You have in here the battery, and that's a battery like this. It will last you for around 4 to 6 hours of shooting outdoor. And then you have here the SD card that goes in and out here. And the right SD card to use for the Leica M9 is this one, and it's almost like an old school SD card these days because it's a 16 gigabyte SanDisk, and the speed of it have to read 45 megabytes a second. If you go and get an advanced card that is much bigger and much faster, you're going to get into trouble because it doesn't really communicate with the camera that well. I mean, some of them do, but a lot of them doesn't, and you have no idea why. So it's better just buy this one. They're really cheap now. Just buy a few of them so you have them for the camera. And then there's one little detail on the bottom plate is that you have a little thing sticking out here, and that is the one that presses down this one. And that's what tells the camera if the bottom plate is on or off. And that means also if you lose the bottom plate, then you'll have to put in a piece of chewing gum or something like here to get the camera to work, because it doesn't want to take any photos without a button plate. That's about most of the camera. Then of course we have the whole backside here, where you have a play button and delete, and you can set the ISO here. So it goes, the base ISO is 160. And you can set a few things in the menu. The menu in this one is really simple. I mean, we're down to basically just like maybe 4 or 5 screens here of things you can set up. And it's like 6 lines on each. So maybe there's 30 things you can set on like an M9. And that makes it like a dream camera. It's really simple compared to even the iPhone. What I learned when I picked up the Leica M9 again was that it's almost like the Leica M240. So if we just forward or go back in time or whatever, then we had the M9 here came out in 2009, and then in 2013 came out the M240. And when the M240 came out, people would ask me, is it worth upgrading from the M9? Because everybody loved the M9. And I said, not really. Like, the problem is when you get the M240, you get used to the faster speed, the faster buffer, and everything is a little bit more sturdy or something. Everything is just a little bit better. So you don't want to go back to the M9. But it also means there's not a big difference between the M9 and the M240. The M240 is just a little bit more modern. And then I used the M240 so much so I kind of forgot the M9. So when I picked it up again, one of the curious things is that now you have a smaller screen, everything is a little bit slower, and it's almost like a really vintage, like old school, like a film camera or something, feel again. And one of the things that was really fun was the sound of the camera. So you listen to this sound, that's like how an M9 sounds. And then if we take an M240, then this is how an M240 sounds. So I've gotten used to this sound, and basically everybody who has an M240 has gotten used to this sound. So when you go back to the M9 and you hear this sound, you're like, wow, this is like the old days, this is really old school. And what I think is funny is also that when the M9 came out, people wanted this short, soft sound that a Leica film camera has. So they're like, wow, this is a lot of noise. And you can set the M9 so they have a discrete mode, so it makes one click and then it does like this rewind sound after. And the rewind sound is not because it's rewinding a film or something, but that's because the shutter clears the sensor for electricity or something like that. But now suddenly this becomes a really pleasant sound because it's old school. And there's a lot of Leica when it's old enough, then we really start liking it. It's like everybody who has a Leica, they like old stuff, apparently. Like they say in England, there's nothing like the old days. So that's one thing I appreciated about this one. Another thing when you pick up the M9 is that you see that the screen here is really small. And it's not very accurate, it's actually very high contrast, but it's still enough so you can see on the screen what is my exposure of the picture, and that's basically all you need. And then of course you have the menu, you can set the ISO and everything on this one. So that's all you need the screen for. So it's not really a big issue that the screen is not big and everything. It doesn't matter. And then you have the speed of it. Now I set it to continuous, and you will hear that it goes like this. It goes 2 pictures a second. And then when we get to here, we stumble into the buffer. So now it's busy writing to the memory card. So you can't take any pictures while it's doing this, and then now it's writing more, and now it's writing more. You see, now it's like 1 picture every 5 seconds or something. So that's something you have to get used to again. And I usually say that when you have an M9, and for example, you're doing portrait and you kind of overshoot, you get a little bit too enthusiastic, and then you fill up the buffer, and you see nothing is happening. Then you just take an artistic break, so you just go with the camera, you just go and look like this, and then the subject thinks that you're doing something really artistic, but you're just waiting for the buffer, but I don't know. Of course, then we have the whole sensor thing, that this is an 18 megapixel, the M240 is 24 megapixels. When you look at the pictures in print or in the computer, you won't actually notice the difference in megapixels. So it doesn't really matter. And right now, it's like Leica is at a still standard 24 megapixel. The new Leica SL came with 24 megapixel. The Leica Q came with 24 megapixels. And that is actually, I think that's enough resolution for the things you want to do. If you really want to do high resolution, then you go get a Leica S or some Sena camera or something like that. Then of course there's another discussion, and that is that one thing is when the M9 came out, people will say, yeah, but it's digital, it has like this digital look, and we really like film. Now, then in 2013 came out the M240, and it changed from a CCD sensor in the M9 to a CMOS sensor in the M240 because they're cheaper to make. They use less energy, you can go higher ISO. So there's a lot of reasons to do that, and also you got live view. But this one has CCD. And a very interesting thing about the CCD is that the way Leica developed this sensor and any other digital sensor they have made is that they looked back and says Kodachrome is the last look that we liked, so we're going to try to tune our sensors to that look. So that's what happened in this one. But still, when the M9 came out, the skin tones is a little bit to red and a little bit to orange. And I actually have on my website, if you're going to go on my website, you can download a Lightroom plugin that is going to change the skin tone so it takes out 8% of the red, desaturate the red with 8%, and the orange with 30%. And that gives more correct skin tones. So the M9 has a particular look, and then when the M240 came out, it had a different look. And that's, in my opinion, it's just a matter of workflow. How do you set your workflow so you get back to the colors you like, the look you like? And you can totally do that, but it's going to take you a month or two before you get there. So when you go back to the M9, then you're back to kind of like the old school colors and CCD sensor. And I don't know what I think about it. It's kind of like, it's different, or it was different when I did this for 6 weeks, but it's also familiar. So it's like, wow, this is like, it's like, you know, you go back to black and white Ilford film, and it's kind of like, it doesn't have a lot of dynamic range and so on, but it's Ilford, so it's good, because everybody knows Ilford is good. And the Leica M9 has the same thing now, that this is the Leica M9, and that's the one that everybody loves, so it's good. So you kind of get over that, so it looks really cool when you do it. One thing that when you go back to a camera from 2009, you can discover is that the ISO doesn't go to 50,000 or 100,000. The ISO on the M9 goes officially to 2,500 when you go in the menu here. But usually when you buy any digital camera and it says it can go, for example, 6,400 ISO, it's usually one stop or 1.5 stop less before you start to get noise. But I always put a little bit higher ISO. In the case of the M9, the max ISO I use the camera on is 800. And you say 800 ISO is like nothing, but it is. We do have cameras today that can do 100 and 200, and we're probably going to get giga ISO before we know of it. But the matter of the fact is that you can actually shoot at 800 ISO. You can do a lot of stuff, especially if you have fast lenses like Leica. You don't necessarily have to have an Oxlux 0.95. You have a lot of the Leica is 2.0, or like this one is 1.4. So you can do a lot of stuff. And there's also the thing that when you shoot it with a Leica, and especially if you're continuous, nothing moves in the camera really except the shutter. So it's not that the camera is moving around a lot, so you can actually take pictures down at 1/15 and 1/8 of a second. That's not something to really worry about. I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, it's nice to have 3,200, it's nice to have 6,400. We're so high in ISO, so it's almost like, it's almost too easy. So maybe it's even more fun to have one that doesn't go higher than 800. And if we look in the really old days of photography, then back in the 40s, I mean, they had film that was down to 25 and 50 ISO. And that would actually do evening photos and night photos with lenses that was 2.8 or 4.0. So, I mean, if you can get 800 ISO to work with 1.4, then maybe that is the reason to get this one and start learning it. Another thing about the ISO is that the Leica here has a ISO of 160 as the base ISO. So that's the one that in theory, that would be the highest quality because that's the ISO that the sensor sees. So when you sit on that one, nothing is changed. So that's what you will use in daylight. It also have something that Leica called Pull 80 ISO. And that's not really something you want to use because if you go down to Pull ISO, then you're stretching the sensor, and that's why they call it pull. And you simply just use about 3 stop of dynamic range. And usually if you go 80 ISO, that's because there's a lot of light, and that's where you need the dynamic range because you need the highlights and the shadows. So you never go there. If you want to shoot a Leica in sunshine, then you go get an ND filter, and that's like this. It's like the sunglasses for lenses. It's a different story. I'll get into it in another chapter. You can also find it on my website. But that's about it on the ISO. 160 outdoor, 800 indoor or in the evening. It works really nice. Don't go higher than that. Then you're going to start to see that sometimes the skin tones change or something. And if you have color photos in the evening of somebody with magenta skin and you can't get rid of it, you basically don't have a color photo. So what can I conclude after 7-8 years with the Leica M9? I shot with my 2 Leica M9s for 3 years. I shot more than 180,000 pictures on them. I didn't have any problems with the camera there, the shutter or anything. So everything is just going really well. I will send my camera to Leica every 6 months or something for cleaning and adjustment. I never clean or adjust myself, so they'll do it for me. But apart from that, there's just been rocking and rolling. And I would say this is actually a perfect camera. If you want to get into Leica, this is like 2,500, maybe even 2,000 only. And then you need a lens, and you can find a good second-hand lens, maybe an old vintage one from the 60s, for less than 1,000, maybe like $400 or something. And then you're into Leica, and it works 95% as well as this one. In terms of image quality, I would say 100%. What the last 5% you get in the M240, the more modern camera, is just faster buffer, bigger screen. That's it. It's more like the feel of the camera is more fast. That's what you get. The way to buy a second-hand Leica is kind of interesting because people will see my Leicas and say, oh, it looks so beautiful with all the brassing here and so on. And then they have their own camera, they still have the plastic on the bottom so it doesn't get scratched. And that is funny enough also when you sell a second-hand Leica. People seem to like brass, but they don't want to buy it. They actually want to buy a camera that's almost like new. I would say that doesn't really matter because this is beaten up. It's been hitting stuff, falling on the floor and everything, and it still works. So in my opinion, it's almost better to have a camera that have really been through war and hell because you know it works. Whereas a camera that just comes out of the closet, nobody ever used it for real, it could fall apart tomorrow, you know. So I wouldn't mind about that, but I know that a lot of people mind about it. And my advice in finding a second-hand Leica is like either you find a widow that has a camera bag full with filters and lenses and cameras and they just want to sell it for whatever. That's usually a good deal. Or you find the guy who already bought the new Leica and now he has the old one. And maybe he asks in the store, what can I get if I trade in this one and that, or you can get $1,500 because they need to make money on it and they need to add VAT. So he's going to be happy with anything above $1,500. So that's why when you buy secondhand, you have a little bit of patience. You don't go buy the first one you see on eBay. You just wait a little bit till you have the guy that says 2,000 or whatever. That's the one you're going to get. And the same with lenses. The lenses doesn't really drop a lot in value in terms of Leica. And you could say if you get into this one at a really good secondhand price, then when you upgrade next time, you're basically not really going to lose money. I think the M9, when it came out, it was 5,600, maybe 6,000. So in 7-8 years, it has dropped to 2,500 as the market price. So that's not a big drop for a digital camera either. So it's not going to drop a lot more from 2.5 or 2,000, whatever you get into. Another possibility is to go back to the Leica M8 that had the crop sensor. I would probably aim for the M9, but you could go with the Leica M8. That's probably around $1,500 secondhand. One good thing about the Leica M8 is that it has really good black and white pictures, and it's also really good for infrared. And for example, Lou Reed, he had a Leica M8 because he did a lot of infrared photography. So if you go on Flickr or somewhere else and you're into infrared, I'm not, but if you're into infrared, then go online and look for infrared pictures with Leica, and you will see a lot of M8 pictures. And the sensor, the way the sensor was made, was really good for infrared. If you want a Leica, this is the way to get it. And it's like, it's a lovely camera, and it's going to be, whenever you meet somebody in the street that recognize the camera, they're going to look at you like they're in love and say, oh, that's an M9, I used to have an M9. And that's what you get. You get a lot of vintage history when you get this camera. That was my review of the M9 on video 7 years later. You should go to my website and look at the 19 pages about the M9. Also go to my website, sign up for my mailing list. You actually get a free ebook if you do that. So if you're really smart, go and do that. And it also means you're going to stay in the know. So if and when I make a page 2020 on the Leica M9, you're going to get an email saying there's more to know about your camera if you get this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.